Welcome to the Business with Beers podcast. This is the place where we help entrepreneurs expand their business, build their wealth, and generate passive income. I'm your host, Brian Beers, an entrepreneur who's on a mission to inspire growth from everyone around me. Remember that you need to take the actions others won't, and you can live the life that others don't. Please be sure to check out my weekly newsletter that now drops every Thursday. It includes one quote, one tweet, one podcast recommendation, plus some business and investing insight from me. It's short and it's sweet. My goal is to provide you with just a couple gold nuggets to help inspire your growth. Go to brianbeers.com to subscribe. Welcome everyone to the Business with Beers podcast. I'm excited today to bring you Lance Graulich. He is the host of one of the top 50 business podcasts called the Ion Franchising. He's been in the franchising business for decades. He's currently a consultant, and he's also a self-proclaimed global donut expert. Welcome to the show, Lance.
Woohoo! Yeah, my story's full of holes.
Yeah,
donut pun intended.
So take me back. You're 18 years old. You graduate high school. Like, how do you get started on this journey in franchising?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And, you know, Brian, it was, let's see, I was going to work for Dad on Wall Street. Dad's company was the largest over-the-counter trading house on Wall Street. I had grandfather that was a real estate attorney, so looked at real estate a bit. But then I had another grandfather that owned businesses, owned supermarkets. So I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but Wall Street's kind of boring. I did it through high school, did it throughout college and just out of college. And then I had a call from a sort of an uncle, my uncle's best friend, who I called an uncle. And he said, I heard you're bored on Wall Street. And at the time I was in New York City, Long Island, New York, etc. So at the time I said, look, I'm bored. And he said, great, come help me build $1 billion restaurant franchise group. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's pretty aggressive. He hasn't even started with one yet, but he was very successful in tech before anybody was even in tech, and lived in a big house. And I said, all right, I'll join you, Uncle Steven. So we built a TGI Fridays franchise from nothing. He acquired 4 locations, and then we did a whole bunch of new builds in multiple cities and states. And 5 years later, we're doing $225 million a year.
Okay.
So I got
why you? Why did he
hell
pick,
of an experience.
Why did he pick you?
Well, he picked me because that's another great question, all about trust, because he knew I was a smart guy and he knew he could trust me. So, and I had some restaurant experience. So I was the perfect template in those days for any franchise, in that I had some knowledge, and I tell people all the time, Brian, your knowledge is transferable. Whatever your past experiences are, you can transfer that knowledge and use that knowledge, so to speak, for a franchise. So I got lucky.
And how old were you then?
Well, I was just out of college, 21 out of college, and then I worked on Wall Street for a little bit after that. So about 22. I'm going to be 23.
And what was your role in that? Were you kind of like the elbows, getting your elbows dirty and working it like in the stores? Like what was your,
you're going to really like this answer, and so are the listeners. I've always had a very strong work ethic. I've worked 7 days a week, nights, weekends, didn't matter. I just do it. My mother, by the way, yelled at me when I was in college because I got a job without her permission.
Oh boy.
Well, isn't that the exact opposite? Yeah. Because she was paying, her and Dad were paying for college. They wanted me in and out 4 years, work for Dad on Wall Street. So, so I got there and Uncle Steven said, yeah, great. You know, I'll help you with the living situation temporarily. And you're going to start as a host in one of our restaurants for $9 an hour. Which maybe was a lot in those days, but it was still nothing to me because I just got off a Wall Street job.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big time broker or anything, or trader at that point. But long story short, you know, I got put through fast track through the management training program, but it's self-paced. So with corporate trainers, you had to be competent, prove your competence in order to get through the program. And I did that very fast. And eventually I became a manager and eventually a regional manager as well. So I fast tracked it. And Uncle Steven would call me in on all the vital phone calls, listening to him negotiate with landlords. listening to him negotiate purchasing contracts because he liked to do certain things himself. So I'd like to say I got my MBA in franchising or in restaurants pretty quickly, listening to him for years.
You're part of this thing. You're on the roller coaster, building it up, 225 million sales. How many restaurants at that point did you have?
Well, at the end of 5 years, that was about 65 or so. High volume, Fridays in the old days, 2.5 million-ish a location.
Yeah, wow. Okay, and then what happened next?
Well, after 5 years, he got bored and went back to Korea to go build another tech company. And my now good friend Ken was running the whole company. And Ken and I were very tight. And I said, Ken, I got to go. He goes, did you call Steven yet? I said, I don't know where he is, somewhere in Asia. There were no cell phones in those days. Left a message at his house. Finally, he calls me back. I said, Steven, I'm out of here. 5 years was enough. I learned enough. You're not even engaged anymore. I was here because of you. And over the years, to fast track your answer, because, I'm going to be 56. So there's a lot of stuff in between. I became a food and beverage director at a major hotel in Las Vegas. Ken, who ran Fridays, had our Fridays franchise, left there, and he became the VP of food and beverage later at that hotel and called me and said, I want you to be the food and beverage director. So, the old expression, people leave people. Steven wasn't engaged. Well, it's the same thing. People on the magnet side of things, Ken and I were attracted to each other, as work buddies. We had an amazing work relationship. So I got in the hotel business. Then a family friend calls me and says, hey, we just got the rights to be the first franchisee at Krispy Kreme in New York City. And oh, by the way, there's an investment banker in New York that wants to get like the whole state of Nevada and Utah. And Lance, you're in Nevada, so I'm recommending to him that he hires you. And we had conversations. I didn't get hired immediately because I was making too much money at that point. So he's just starting up Krispy Kreme before it had the big volumes that people know today. Because, Krispy Kreme, a lot of people don't know, like a lot of franchises, they don't necessarily they didn't start 30, 40 years ago with these amazing volumes and lines and what have you. So it took a while, but eventually I went over to Krispy Kreme, became the managing partner, ran that whole thing from when it had just one store to 26 million in revenue. And we were one of the lucky franchisees. We had a great development agreement. Krispy Kreme corporate at one point got pretty greedy and forced people to open too many stores too quickly, which we could talk about if we have more time. And then eventually I was like, I'm going to do something on my own, and didn't have all my own money, but did Wingstop while I was a very successful franchisee and president of the Franchise Advisory Council. Boy, I created an awful partnership for myself as I was raising money that was no fun, but I had great stores, high volume. And let's see, I created a donut chain called Pink Box Donuts using my donut skills, not all of which I acquired at Krispy Kreme. I had a burger place called Create that was incredibly well known in Vegas, won Best Burger. I created that from scratch. But Pink Box, by the way, as I bounce around, Pink Box is alive and well. And, my partner and I sold that and doing incredibly well with the new owners. I'm a builder, if you can't tell by my stories, Brian. I love.
Right. You get bored. You build and then you're bored, right?
Yeah, I get bored. I don't like maintaining. I'm a builder. And then, those are some highlights. And then I've helped a Food Network star start a donut shop. A buddy of mine that's on the board of Jamba Juice, now called Jamba, called me and said, hey, I got a Food Network star friend that wants to start a donut chain, and he's a bakery expert. However, he's not a donut expert like you. Can you help him? And I got a contract to help him for a period of time. But look, along the way, I fell into franchising, as you can tell. And I started having a lot of brands ask me, hey, can you do franchise development for me, sales, and put people in the franchisee seat of my company to help me grow. And I said, sure, that sounds easy. And I realized, wait a second, that's like the best job in the world. I don't have to work nights or weekends if I don't want to. And I still choose to do that for my clientele because I love doing what I'm doing. I love helping people find the right business. And I feel like I was a good franchisee. And I know after an in-depth interview with each individual and, what would fit them. It's kind of like a tailor. I look at you, Brian, I know what size you might be, and we start trying some stuff on, and then it's what material do you like? What fits you best? What's your investment level? What role are you going to play? And I love it. So as a large franchise broker, franchise consultant, I find people their perfect business. It might not be sexy, but it's going to be a moneymaker if you follow the system. So I do it for free.
There you go.
That's the other fun part.
So then, so what are some of the biggest mistakes you see potential franchisees making, when they're starting to get into, maybe they haven't bought something yet, but they're starting to explore the process. Like, what are some of the mistakes or landmines that people should be aware of? That's
what I call the mismatch. It's like a bad marriage, Brian. When somebody marries, we've all been there, hopefully not ourselves personally in a bad marriage, but we've witnessed it. We've witnessed the train wreck. You look at a couple and you're like, I don't know how that works. Well, there's plenty of franchisees that I've seen over the years, and I listen sometimes to what they say. Well, I listen all the time to what they say, but as I digest it, I sometimes think.
Scratch your head a little bit.
What was that?
You scratch your head a little bit?
I scratch my head and I go, well, why did you select this franchise in the first place? Franchising, like a marriage, is a two-way street. So the answer to your question is there's typically a mismatch. And the mismatch usually happens because the franchisee really underestimates what their role really is going to be and who's really going to run this particular franchise. Look, when I was with Wingstop as a franchisee, hot brand, growing like crazy, I'd see people come in. I was president of the Franchise Advisory Council. So I'd have a lot of people, once they were in the brand, call me. I don't know what, this happened and that happened. And I'm like thinking to myself, you should have asked these questions before you got in the brand. You're the only franchisee in the state of such and such, fill in the blank. So, from a purchasing perspective, you should have realized that maybe things aren't going to be set up, and maybe that's the brand's fault. But look, the bottom line is you got to pick the right franchise for you. A lot of people have the shiny object syndrome. Yep. They hear from somebody that restaurants are a great thing to do. And while restaurants are a very popular segment of franchising, they are the most difficult because there are more things that can go wrong than right. And if you're choosing not to run it full time, at least initially, you should be running it full time. To be a semi-absentee owner in a restaurant is incredibly complicated when you can have all kinds of theft. Now, myself, I can do that because I have years of experience in the industry. But most of these people, you don't need experience in the industry, but you need an awareness of what's going on. And that just means you spending the first 6 months at least focused on that particular, the technical side of that business. Yeah.
So in the food business, is it, I see guys like you and they start one concept, they have another concept, Is it, even though the concept is different, is like from your perspective of owning it, is it kind of like you're running the same business, whether you're making donuts or wings or burgers or whatever?
Yeah. And in most cases, the reason that people diversify is, well, either they don't like their original concept anymore, but their stores do well and they want to keep them. A lot of times you don't have any development ability anymore. There are people I know that do a 3-unit deal, and then by the time they're ready to do more,
it's all sold out.
It's all sold out. Yeah. But yeah, it's still your restaurant group. It's Brian Restaurant Group, whether you have, Wingstop, Krispy Kreme, whatever, Duck Donuts. If you have all three of them, you could use some of obviously the same systems.
Yeah.
If you have a
your back office and
the back office. Absolutely. Whatever analysis you do at Krispy Kreme, we had weekly P&Ls, some daily snapshots.
What about employees?
Yeah, and employees, you can absolutely share. I know people that get their sort of area managers or their top GMs certified across multiple brands. So it's kind of plug and play,
It's interesting.
Go to Wingstop, go there. But it just depends how big you are or small you are. As you know, Brian, as a big franchisee, there are certain economies of scale that appear as you are much larger. It's much different when you have 30 locations of anything, even if it's 2 different brands or 3 different brands, than 4 of 2 different brands.
Yep. Yeah. What's kind of interesting to me too is like then the other reason is diversification, and people have different needs. And if you have a breakfast concept and a cookie concept or whatever, and then the same shopping center, I mean, you get the same customers and you get the morning sale and the night sale.
Absolutely.
And so
there is something to be said. While there are some franchisees that diversify, I have friends that own restaurants and friends that own, barbershops, franchises, hair salons, things like that. It's familiar being in brick and mortar, but then there's people that are, all over the place. They're doing a home services brand. They're doing home care, which really have nothing to do with each other. And then I have clients I work with on a regular basis. I have a guy that's like, I think I want a plumbing franchise. And then later I'll come back and do an electrician's type franchise. And I will share the same customers in my areas, which is a good theory and could work very well.
How did you approach it? Did you have multiple running at the same time, or you kind of all in on the thing you were in, you sold it, then you went all in on the next thing?
No, it's, for me, I still had Wingstops when I was doing Create. Create was my burger place, and that was my independent shop. So I did that at the same time. But for me, it was more like timing, it was more like a strategy. It's kind of like what we're experiencing in the world now. Everybody's attempting to figure out timing, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's real estate, but at the end of the day, what I love about franchising is there's always a good time to get into a franchise. The question is, especially in a recessionary period, there are tons of recession-proof or recession-resistant franchises. Let's just call it what it is, and we learned the word during the pandemic. Essential business.
Essential, yeah. So let's go over some of those, because I've been thinking about that a lot too. More people are talking to me about what type of things, and they're coming saying, hey, this is like a premium Aussie bowl thing. And I'm kind of thinking, I don't, a $12 bowl, like someone might cut that like before they cut something else out of their life. So I don't know.
Yes.
From your perspective, what are some of the ones that you are more comfortable with?
You started that conversation perfectly, because my father, who passed away several years ago, Dad would always say, if you're on the low end of the restaurant business, meaning, fast food, a lower check, obviously not fine dining, but I don't know that Chipotle will be terribly affected throughout.
Yeah. Little Caesars will probably be fine with their $5 pizzas.
Yeah. Little Caesars. But, the fancier dinners, the special occasion dinners that are, $50 a person maybe could be affected. But, in franchising, automotive, which you're in, look, if somebody needs to fix their car, now, if they don't have a job, this is the crazy part about a recession. And I was an economics major, and the crazy part about a recession is they're waiting for pain. They're waiting for people to be unemployed that don't leave their house. The supply chain gets to blossom, if you will. Now they have to cut prices, which is, there's a shortage of everything, from gasoline to products. So think in terms of, what people are gonna need to do no matter what. So when you think of air conditioning or plumbing or electrical, people need all of that. Home care. If you have a relative that's 70 years old and needs help in the house, home care, non-medical companion care, as we call it, is booming. Why? Every day another 10,000 people turn 65. It was a little stifling in the middle of the pandemic because of the pandemic and home care and caretakers coming to take care of elderly folks. But let me tell you, home care got through that pretty quickly. So now that we're out of that, going through a recessionary period, home care is going to continue to do well, because you're not giving the money up to take care of mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. The other thing is kids and pets. There's a whole notion of kids and pets. Are you going to stop paying for soccer for your son? We have amazing kid-related franchises, pet-related franchises. It could be possible, if you lose your job, you are skipping the next grooming of Fido, but more than likely not. I know my wife wouldn't.
Yep. And the doggy daycare, maybe you're going I mean, if you're not going to work, maybe you don't have to send your dog.
But yes, and that in the extreme circumstances that could happen, but generally speaking,
you're going to get another job, just maybe lower paid, but like you still got to do that makes sense.
You're still going to filter your funds to the things that are most important to the people in your family you have to take care of. You're still going to eat. You're just not going to eat the fancy stuff. So, plenty of restaurant, you're still going to eat some donuts. Anybody can go out, get a box of donuts and share that with the whole office or family or whatever it might be. So, in some cases, it's easier to talk about franchises that don't work in a recessionary period.
So let's do with the ones that don't, that you're staying away from right now. Or tentative a little bit on.
It's any of the high-end restaurants, which, or even the casual dining restaurants that typically have a higher check. Because what's going to happen,
like Fridays or
like Fridays and Applebee's and Chili's,
and those are big ones too.
Yeah, they're just going to be customers will trade down. They'll trade down and go to Chipotle an extra time a month, or El Pollo Loco, or Burger King, McDonald's, whatever, Wendy's. People just trade down to save a few bucks, especially if, like you, in your example, you got a job that is now paying less or whatever it might be. You're not going to do some things on your house that were elective. Like during the pandemic, you're going to fix things. And a lot of people were fixing things, but during the pandemic, a lot of people remodeled. A lot of people remodeled their homes. Why? Because they were stuck at home staring at the closet that they hated. And husbands and wives, I mean, women make all the decisions. We know that. So for you ladies listening, you can laugh all you want, but we know you make the decisions, and I love it. Makes it easier on me. So, but at the end of the day, you want to remodel your closet, do all those things. Those things really happen during the pandemic. But how much does that really happen during a recession? If you don't have the money to redo certain parts of your house, closets, blinds, window washing, I don't know, things that are just like, it's nice but not necessary. Well, but we so that's a good point. So like Window Genie, Window Hero that they're in the portfolio are services, similar companies like McDonald's, Burger King, where they'll do the hard to reach spots on your house, cleaning gutters, cleaning the roof, cleaning, windows inside and out, things that homeowners like never do. I mean, there's rarely, I don't have any friends that do that themselves. And it's like, it could be $99 a month. You're not going to cancel that necessarily. That's not like enough. I mean, look, we all know we all carry a certain amount of subscriptions to things. Are we going to give up the gym? I'm not giving up the gym no matter what, because I just have my annual checkup and it's still good. But I'm telling you, me going to the gym is what helps that. So fitness during the pandemic was awful, obviously, for obvious reasons. But fitness is still a good place to be, an okay place to be during the recession, especially coming out of the pandemic, where sadly everybody, we all gained a few pounds, I think, right?
The COVID-15, or whatever they called it.
COVID, but like restoration brands, I'm flip-flopping here on good and bad. So restoration brands, your water heater explodes, there's a hurricane, there's a tornado, you have thunderstorm damage, a lot of great restoration type franchises. And guess what? You're not giving that up.
And it's insurance paid in that case a lot of times. So
exactly.
Cool. Well, we got a good list there. Appreciate that. So I want to shift to looking at emerging versus legacy brands. Right. Yeah. So like, all my history is with like a legacy brand, Midas, from 1956. But I also know, so that's like what I know. But I want to learn about emerging brands and why would someone look at that versus a more established brand? Like, what's the pros and the cons here?
Well, number one, I had a big smile as soon as you mentioned it, because it's I've had people that say to me, I just want a proven brand. I don't want some newer brand. And I said, well, define for me what you think proven is. Oh, like McDonald's. And I said, okay, well, you won't get a McDonald's. So if you want a proven brand, you're not going to get it. So as an example, when I got into Wingstop, a lot of my friends in the restaurant industry looked at me and said, what the heck is that? I never even heard of that. I said, yeah, exactly, but you will. And they looked at me and scratched their head. I opened the first Wingstop. And what do you think what happened when I opened the first Wingstop
First
in
ever
Las Vegas?
or Las Vegas?
In Las Vegas. When I opened the first Wingstop in Las Vegas, Wingstop corporate later told me that they had so many inquiries from prospective franchisees, and they said, sorry, the guy whose store you visited owns all of Clark County, so no. So you're too late. So the danger of getting in too late is that there's no territory. I spoke to a guy that's a very successful franchisee of a hot cookie brand. I'll give you a hint. It's a cookie brand and one of the hottest brands in the country. And he moved to a different city specifically so he can do that particular franchise. And let me tell you, it paid off. He's probably going to make about $14 million on his exit.
By selling the portfolio of stores he opened?
By selling.
Yeah.
So,
but then there's so many new ones though. So like, those are the ones. How does someone go and say, I mean, you believed in Wingstop, right? Where you said, you told your friend, hey, this is going to be big. So like going into it, you're pumped up. Like, you're believing in the concept, believing that this thing is going to be worth it. Thus you buy, an area development agreement or whatever. So like,
yes.
I mean,
so
what are the
things? I can give you the easy answer. Let me give you the easy answer. The easy answer to know, I show people smaller brands all the time. But depending on the person's personality, and we have assessments that we can give them, free assessments that help determine based on their mindset, skill set, life experiences. It's on my website and it's free. And it's really, really helpful to understand what their comfort zone is like. Obviously, the bigger somebody's comfort zone, I call it the couch. It's the bigger their couch. So they're not getting off that couch anytime soon. And so, but here's how it goes. In franchising, it's so safe when you keep your eyes open and you work with a franchise broker consultant like myself, because we're going to direct you. We're going to ask you, we're going to tell you to look at that franchise disclosure document that every franchisor is required to give you. There's 23 items in it. Item 19 is the earnings claim. They bury all the good stuff towards the end. And the item 19, for example, I have an air conditioning brand that will tell you that the top 25% of franchisees do $9 million, and the average franchisee does 3.5, and it's only $150,000 investment on average. I mean, is there a way you can't make money with that? Well, no, if you're following the system correctly. I mean, that's the answer. And then if you're not sure, you go to the validation stage, with which every great brand has some sort of validation, where you actually get to talk to existing franchisees and ask questions like, do you feel supported? Would you do this over again? Do you make money? Most importantly, how long did it take you to make money? What are they doing to support you with marketing? So after that, like a marriage, like any good relationship, it's got to feel right. Otherwise, you don't do it and you move to the next brand. And I have people every once in a while, in most cases, they're down to like 2 brands. And I just tell them, hey, it's a natural thing. Proceed forward with both brands. Go to validation with 2 brands. One will appear the clear leader at the end. Trust me. And then sometimes it's more difficult to understand whether or not they should move on from a brand they might have heard a red flag or have read about what's something they call a red flag. So something that would cause concern, but that's what I help people through. Look, not everybody is going to be successful in a franchise because maybe you're not wired to follow a system, trust the process, and listen to people. There are people like that. I had a CPA, very smart guy, worth a lot of money, owns a lot of real estate. He wanted a fitness brand in one of his shopping centers. And I connected him with one of my favorite fitness brands. He had a conversation with them. He was almost immediately kicked out of the system. The VP of development calls me and says, she says to me, Lance, he's not going to fit our culture. And I go, yeah, I was afraid of that. And she starts laughing. She goes, I was actually mad at you that you sent me this person. And I was like, no, I knew. I knew. I just thought I thought I was being too judgy too soon. And I said, do me a favor, give him one more chance. And I had a sidebar conversation. I called him and I said, look, I need you to slow your roll. I need you to listen more, talk less. It's like pledging a fraternity or a sorority. You have to be a culture fit. And you were a little belligerent, arrogant. You're not giving them the warm and fuzzy that you're coachable, approachable. And he goes, oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I get that sometimes. And he was on the second call. He was late. He didn't apologize. He was kicked out. He was done. So at the end of the day, it's not difficult to find somebody a good fit. It doesn't have to be. I'm going to show people proven brands that have maybe 50 locations or 25 or 100. It doesn't have to be 500 locations. Mm-hmm. That if you're in multiple cities, different sizes. So let's say from Dallas to Louisville, Kentucky, to Des Moines, Iowa, 3 just random different type cities, and you're seeing success, and you the prospect, look in the FDD, you look at the item 19, you see the numbers, and you're like, wow, they're doing well in all these cities, even though they have 3 locations. That's a heck of a sign that they have what we call proof of concept. And proof of concept is really all you're looking for. Now, if somebody you're working with doesn't see proof of concept, unless it's like Great Clips with 4,000 plus stores, then you look for the few brands like that fit.
Yep, that makes sense. How do you recommend someone goes about, like, I don't know, underwriting the item 19? That's something when I'm talking to people about, franchises, that's their biggest concern is like, how do I see the numbers, but like, what do I do with it? Like, how do you advise people on that? Or
well, great. It's another great question. And really what you should be doing as a prospective franchisee of any brand is creating your own business plan, because at the end of the day, it's about you. This has to fit for you. So I'll give you an example. One of my home services brands gave my candidate an amazing fill-in spreadsheet, already done, beautiful, every detail imaginable, and even an ROI calculator built into it based on, but this gives my clients, my candidates, the ability, let me answer it this way. I say to them, where are you going to be on the spectrum of franchisees? Have you been average your whole life? Do you consider yourself above average? I mean, when I was a franchisee, I was a top 1% franchisee. I'm very competitive. I work hard. I knew I was going to be a full-time owner operator. So most of my candidates are like, well, I'm definitely going to be average, but a lot of my candidates say I'm going to be above average. I said, okay, so look at the FDD, and if the average, it's a $150,000 franchise and the average revenue is $900,000. Some of the item 19 show profitability or margins, some don't, but you can validate or verify that with existing franchisees and put together your business plan. And I had a guy the other day, one of my candidates, he's like, I don't know if I'm going to make enough money based on the numbers. And I was like, well, let's take a look at your numbers. And I said, I think you're being really conservative. And he looked back at the item 19, because I didn't have the item 19 in front of me, the newest one. I have an older one, but he gets the item 19. If we want to discuss numbers, we can, but he needs to make sure it's right for him. So we went back through the numbers, and sure enough, he was ultra conservative. And like, he had himself pegged as like a bottom 20% performer. And he goes, and it wasn't that he was going to go out of business. It just wasn't going to make as much money. I said, but by the time he plugged it in and said he was like, above average, he goes, oh, wait a second. So at the end of the day, you really lean on the brands, looking at the item 19 numbers, and whatever you don't have, you're going to have holes, holes in the business plan. So what you need to do, and that you get to do, is you validate with existing franchisees. I had somebody recently that came back to me and said, I got some great information, but I'm still dark because I asked some of these questions to certain franchisees, and I'm not sure I didn't really get the answers that I was looking for. It's, maybe I didn't ask the right question. I said, well, call some other franchisees. And then finally, he got the validation he needed. But look, at the end of the day, I think one of the toughest things is, like, when I was exploring Wingstop, even in validation, I spoke to a couple of franchisees that were unhappy.
Yep.
Now, people that aren't really business people and it's their first business, if they talk to one unhappy franchisee, they could actually eliminate that franchise entirely, which is a mistake. Why? Because if you want to work for Google as an employee, are there going to be unhappy people at Google?
Yep.
Of course there are.
Yeah.
You talk to a friend and go, well, my friend works at Google and he hates it. So that means everybody hates it. So it's the same thing in franchising. So I spoke to a lady, and quite honestly, I would never speak to her again. And after that, and I even called corporate Wingstop and said, look, it was Bruce that was in charge of franchising. I said, Bruce, who is this crazy lady I just talked to? She is so miserable and unhappy. And guess what? I got the real story from Bruce. Bruce is like, well, the franchise, it was for her husband. They got divorced and she ended up keeping it and running it. And she's a poor performing franchisee.
Yep. Yeah, you got to call.
Don't talk to the poor performing franchisees. I asked,
but you don't know who they are, though, right? Like, because you're just going at random.
Well, here's the funny thing. There are some people. This is such a good topic. Some people get into validation, and they're like, "I want the list of all the franchisees." And some brands will give you the entire list. Call whoever you want. They want to be and that's being 100% transparent. Here's all the franchisees. I don't know who you're going to get on the phone. Text them. Maybe we can help expedite that. But then there's other people that have like validation calls with franchisees. Obviously, they're better performing franchisees. They're not the worst. They have to be willing to come on the phone. But I've had people say to me, Lance, how do I get to talk to the worst franchisees to find out about why they think it sucks? And I go, well, I would caution against that from my personal experiences. What I want to do is I want to talk to the best. I want to talk to like the top 4 franchisees I can get a hold of, and I want to make sure their story's in sync. Why do they love the brand? What is their profitability? How did they get there? That's all I need.
Yep. Because
I'm going to be one of them.
Yep.
So
someone once told me you call the guys from like Massachusetts and New York, and they'll tell you the truth.
I love it. You know what? That is, look,
that was good advice.
I love it. Yeah.
Don't call the Southern guys. They're too nice or whatever. But
such a good point.
Cool. So where can people connect with you if they're interested in learning more about franchising and kind of into your world?
Awesome. Well, I have a big Instagram presence, Lance Graulich, which is my name, .ionfranchising, EYEonfranchising.com. And that is my website as well, EYEonfranchising.com. And happy to help anybody. Love what I do. Love to help you find your perfect business.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for coming on and sharing all your knowledge. It's been fun.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
That's all we got for this episode with the Business with Beers podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is to rate the show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on your preferred social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find all my links at brianbeers.com. Please just share the podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, remember to take the actions others won't, to live the life that others don't.